Welcome back to Fresh Corduroy, the podcast about skiing, the people who love it, and the ideas shaping where the sport is headed. Today's episode is a powerful one. My guest is Kelly Brush, former Division I ski racer, lifelong skier, and the founder of the Kelly Brush Foundation. Kelly grew up in Vermont in a ski racing family, competed at the highest collegiate level, and was in the middle of one of the strongest seasons of her career when a racing accident changed her life forever. That moment didn't end her relationship with skiing, it transformed it. In this conversation, we talk about two things that matter deeply to anyone who cares about skiing. First, ski racing safety, how far we've come, where the risks remain, and why education and culture matter just as much as equipment. And second, adaptive sports access, how getting people back into motion, back into the outdoors, and back into community can be genuinely life-changing. We get into sit skiing, stop the bleed kits, international safety standards, adaptive equipment costs, and what it really means to belong in mountain spaces, whether you're standing or sitting on the snow. This is a thoughtful, honest, and deeply human conversation about resilience, responsibility, and why sport can still be a powerful force for good. Before we dive in, if you enjoy conversations like this about skiing, safety, access, and the people pushing the industry forward, make sure you follow Fresh Corduroy wherever you get your podcasts. It's the best way to support the show and make sure you never miss an episode. And now, let's get some Fresh Corduroy with Kelly Brush. Kelly, welcome to Fresh Corduroy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. This is awesome.
It is awesome having you here. I really appreciate you joining me today. So as we dive right in, let's talk about the Kelly Brush skiing origin story. Where and when did you get started skiing?
Yeah, so I grew up in Vermont. So this is where I started to ski, and it was a thing that we did with my family. It was very much our family sport. So my mom was an Olympic ski racer. She skied in the 1976 Olympics, and my dad was a ski racer his whole life and coached skiing at Middlebury College for 10 years. And so when my sister and I were around, that was obviously the sport that they were going to get us into. So they took us to Stowe, is where I grew up skiing. So we had great friends that were there, and so they took us to Stowe every weekend, and I just loved it, and I got into racing. So I started when I was, I think, 3, and then I started racing when I was 7, and it was just like, always fun. I never didn't want to go, and just loved it always. And so it's a family sport that I did as a kid, and that continues today. I still love to ski with my family, and I do it with my kids now too. And so it's just, it's a huge part of who I am.
It's awesome. Will your kids take up ski racing, or have they taken up ski racing?
Oh my goodness, they both have, which is like really crazy to me. Yeah, they're 6 and 9, and our 9-year-old raced last year for the first time. And at the end of the year, there was like a family race, and our 6-year-old hopped in that and just was so hooked. And I was like, are we really putting her in at 6? I mean, she'll be 7 soon, but this is the only year that they'll overlap with races and stuff. I was like, we're already driving up both days of the weekend. We might as well take both of them. So yeah, they're doing it. It's a blast. It's fun to see.
And are you or dad the ski technician?
Oh yeah, that's their dad. I can, and I will fill in because I put in many years of tuning my own skis, but yeah, that falls to him more often, I will say.
Got it. Yes, it fell to me, but it was understandable considering my wife did not grow up ski racing or skiing that much. She did pass the skiing test before we got engaged. So
perfect. Yeah, an important one.
So let's talk about your ski racing career and sort of what brought you to create the Kelly Brush Foundation. But tell your story about ski racing and of course the accident that precipitated the foundation of the Kelly Brush Foundation.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I said, I mean, I grew up skiing at Stowe, and when I was looking to high school, it was sort of are you going to really lean into ski racing, or am I going to lean into other things? And I decided to sort of go all in on ski racing. So I decided to go to a ski academy. I went to the Green Mountain Valley School, in Waitsfield in Vermont, and which was a great move for me. I really loved it there, and ultimately ended up at Middlebury College. You know, I was doing pretty well in high school. You know, I was racing across the country. I skied in 2 national championships. I was racing in Europe, you know, a couple times a year usually. It was great, and I was loving it. And so skiing Division 1 in college was really my goal. So I was lucky enough that I got to go to Middlebury, which again was a great place for me, and I had a really good experience there. It was during my sophomore year. I was skiing really well. I had had one of my best races of my career the weekend before at Dartmouth, and then it was the Williams College Carnival down in Massachusetts at Jiminy Peak, and it was during the GS. I was about halfway down the course. I somehow got spun around backwards, and my last memory was thinking I was going down backwards and thinking that I was going to hit the next gate. And that's the last thing that I remember. What happened after that was my skis kind of hooked up and threw me sideways off the trail, and I hit a lift tower that wasn't protected by any fencing or anything. And I broke my back, and I'm paralyzed from the chest down. So from that accident, you know, I obviously was thrown into a huge unknown, and I didn't know what my life was going to be like. But I also really saw a need and saw that there was opportunity to make a difference. And I had a ton of community that rallied around me to support me. And I said, I want to, you know, harness this support and make something good come out of my accident. And so there were sort of two things that really became clear to me in ways that I could help. And the first was safety in ski racing. You know, my accident shouldn't have happened, and we wanted to change that. I wanted to make sure that an accident like mine never happened again. And there was a lot of work to be done there. So that was the first thing we wanted to do with the Kelly Brush Foundation. And the second was all around adaptive sports. For me, I was an athlete my whole life. Like I talked about skiing and ski racing and how important that was for me, but I got into all sorts of sports. You know, like I played soccer and lacrosse in high school, but as a young kid, I was playing softball and basketball and tennis and swimming and, you know, like anything that I could try, I did. And the idea of not being able to do those things ever again was devastating to me. And when I learned about adaptive sports, it totally changed my perspective and made me realize that I could still be the same person. I could still do the same things. Some of them were just going to look a little bit different, but it didn't have to change who I was just because of my disability. But I also saw a lot of barriers to getting into adaptive sports, and I wanted to make sure that everyone with a spinal cord injury had the opportunity to be active. So that was the other mission, and we have done so much work in both of these to help improve safety in ski racing and to provide access to recreation and sports for people with spinal cord injuries. And it's been incredible. It's been just about 20 years since all of that happened. That was 2006 when I had my accident. So the 20th anniversary of my accident's coming up.
So I want to take those two components and talk about it, the ski racing safety aspect and then the adaptive access in turn. I guess let's start with the ski racing safety, because that's how I came to know about the foundation and you. And I think maybe it starts with understanding the risk. You talked about, hitting an unprotected ski tower, a lift tower. Interestingly, a contemporary of mine growing up ski racing was Chris Waddell.
Yes.
Another Middlebury ski team athlete who, unfortunately struck a tree, as I recall, training up the road from Jiminy Peak at Berkshire East, and suffered the same type of injury. It's the risk associated with hitting something, an inanimate object, has been there for a very long time. And it seems, at least to me, I mean, I grew up, like I said, ski racing, there wasn't protection. And frankly, we were skiing with bamboo poles back in the day, so even less protection. Mm-hmm. So how do you, where did we start, and where are we in the path, if you will, of moving to something? I don't think we can eliminate all risk, but how are we moving towards minimizing risk as much as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know Chris very well, so there's our 1 degree of separation.
He doesn't know me. I was, he
Oh,
would
there
always
you go.
he would always beat me. Let's put it that way, right? So
That's funny. You know of him. Okay. Well, Chris is a great friend. He's done incredible things since his accident too. But so, for safety in ski racing, you're absolutely right. Like years and years ago, there was nothing. There was hay bales along the side of the trail to stop people from sliding into the woods. And what we found is that as technology increased, the safety aspects, so technology in terms of the skis and how fast we could go on them, the safety technology didn't follow. So especially as like shape skis came into being, that will throw you in different ways than straight skis will, and they will hook up in a different way, and safety didn't follow, and speeds really increased and safety didn't increase as well. So that was kind of the moment that I was in, where we really had this sort of expansion of shape skis, of speed in the sport, but safety just that didn't keep up. And I think a lot of people had seen it and raised it, but nobody had ever done anything about it. And that was sort of the moment that I was in, that it was like, we really can do something about this now. The biggest thing that we wanted to do at the time was to change the culture, right? So things like BNet was around. So the red fencing, most usually red, sometimes blue fencing that's on the side of the trails, the race trails. That's the BNet that helps people so that you're hitting that instead of hitting an object, whether it's trees, whether it's lift towers, snowmaking guns, like whatever. That stuff was around, but it wasn't utilized. And it was a lot more important to get the race off than it was to make sure that it was safe. And that was the culture shift that we needed to change. And so we set to do a lot of work around that. And it took a while. I mean, it took probably 10 years to really make a big change. But I really do think that we've really changed the culture in the US around safety and ski racing. And it's a huge priority now. And I think there's always more work to be done, and there's always people that need reminders, and there's always more that we can do. But we really made a big difference and made a really big impact. We also do grants, and we started right from the beginning to help people purchase the equipment that they need to make sure that they have the safety equipment. So a lot of that is BNet, but it's other things like A-net and Willy bags and trail widening projects to get rid of those random trees that are in the way and that sort of thing. And I think that's been really impactful because we've been able to sort of put our money where our mouth is, right? It's one thing to advocate for this, but it's another thing to say, and we're going to actually help you do it. And we've been doing grants all across the country since the very beginning to help ski clubs and ski areas purchase the equipment that they need to make sure that everybody's safe. And then in the last probably 7 or 8 years, we've really started to make a big push for more education because people need to understand why it's important. They need help getting that equipment to make sure that they actually have the safety equipment they need, but they also need to know how to use it. So if you have it and you want to put it up, but you're doing it wrong, then it's not going to help anybody. So we've done a lot of work. We have a consultant who works with us now. He's probably the leading expert in safety in the US. And he's a huge asset for us. He does all of these safety seminars around the country, educating coaches and officials on how to actually make sure that their venues are as safe as possible. And that's made a huge difference for us also. I think the place that we're at right now is that there's more that needs to be done outside of the US. We've primarily focused here in the United States, and we've made a really big difference here. Like I said, always more that we can do. But what we're seeing is that there's been a lot of deaths recently internationally, and a lot of them are because of lack of basic safety equipment and improper installation. So there was a death down in Chile of an Italian ski racer this fall. There was a death of another Italian ski racer in Italy a year ago. There was a couple other big accidents too. Both of those had improper BNet installation. So it's what we know is that ski racing happens all over the world. And our racers from here in the US go all over the world. If people are skiing at an academy level in high school, they're traveling outside of the US to ski, to train or to race, or probably both. And we need to make sure that wherever they're training and racing is as safe as it is here in the US. And so that's kind of our next move, is to really make sure that we can make an impact outside of the US also.
So it sounds to me that where you can make the biggest impact today is internationally, as opposed to the U.S. So we've come a long way. I'm sure there's still things to do, and we can talk about the other initiatives aside from BNet, because I think about the Clean Hill Initiative and Stop the Bleed, and there are other things that are coming to the fore in terms of, again, how do we prevent injury? But you're right. You identified, two of the recent tragedies that Italy suffered and elsewhere. It sounds like education and shipping that education, or exporting it, is of paramount importance in terms of making the most impact. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yes, I think so. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. So those things that you mentioned, right? The Clean Hill Initiative, that was a education that was developed by Paul, who's our consultant that I mentioned a minute ago, and has really taken off and been widely shared. And I think a lot of people really understand that. Stop the Bleed, right? There's laceration injuries that have really increased over the last several years. There's lots of different reasons for that, lots of different theories, I should say, on reasons for that. But it's something that we've stepped up and when we've really helped with, and we're distributing a ton of Stop the Bleed kits still every year. And that's been really, really wildly impactful, and something that we're continuing to do. So yeah, I by no means will say that job here is done in the US, and there's always more to do. And there's always, the work is definitely going to continue, and our grants will continue. But I think that we need to make sure that we're looking internationally too. And I think, one of the things that we're really excited about is working with FIS, right, the International Ski Federation that oversees all ski racing. And we've started to work with them starting this fall, thinking about how we can implement what we are doing here in the US in countries all over the world. And US Ski and Snowboard has been a really great partner of ours. They are actually, they co-fund the consultant position that we have that does all this safety. And we do a bunch of work with them to make sure that we can get some education and some advocacy out to coaches and officials. So we want to try to mimic sort of the relationship we have with US Ski and Snowboard, and do that with some of the other national ski associations to make sure that we're getting this message out, so the education, and then also figuring out how we can help to support their safety needs the same way we do in the US.
And who is the education targeted at, both here in the U.S.? I mean, I know I'm a recipient of it, but I almost feel like we're playing a little insider baseball. You and I know what we're talking about. I'm not sure everybody who's listening maybe. So who is the education targeting, both here in the U.S., and who will you intend it to target internationally? And where does it make the most difference? There's at least three constituencies, probably more. There's the parents, there's the athlete, and there's the coaches. Fourth might be ski area management. So you could probably extend fans. That's
right. Yeah.
Carry on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So historically, the way that our sort of education modules have worked have really been focused on the coaches and officials. So that's coaches from all over the country, and then officials, so the people who actually run the races, so the technical delegates, the TDs, and then everybody who's going to actually help to run the race at the different ski areas. So that's been where we've focused for the education, because a lot of the education that we're providing is pretty technical. It's how you install BNet, it's how you maintain it, it's what the hill actually has to look like, that sort of stuff. So that's where that's been targeted to. We also, a lot of these have been done at conferences and different updates and things like that. We've done some seminars too, where we actually will do, when there's a big race, whether it's a NORAM or something else, that we bring together a small group of people that apply to do this, and actually have a weekend where there's 10 to 20 people that go up on the hill and and are literally taken around to like look at safety and say like, this is how you do this is why you do this, and then they can take that back to their home mountains. And that's actually been wildly successful, and we're hoping to do some more of those. But those have been really great for especially people coming from smaller mountains that, you know, don't have the opportunity to see some of these really big races and what safety can really look like there. So that's been really great. I think internationally, when we think about expanding, this is something that we're doing a lot of learning right now, because take Europe, for example, they actually function pretty differently. And so who actually is in control of safety there is different than here in the US. So here it's really the clubs that own it. The clubs are the ones who purchase BNet. They're the ones who install it. They're the ones who maintain it, you know, hand in hand with mountain operators in certain ways, right? Grooming and that sort of stuff. But really it's the clubs that are in charge, and coaches who are going to be looking at safety on a day-to-day basis and determining what's needed. In Europe, I think that's different. So this is learning that we're doing, that the clubs maybe don't have quite as prominent a role, and there's definitely more role for some of the mountains and ski patrol and things like that. So we need to learn and continue to understand the landscape there in order to really understand how we can be most influential. I'm really excited to have a partner in FIS because they're able to help us have that audience. I'm hopeful that that's gonna continue to work really well. Obviously, that's something that we need to stay on, and they're a really big organization, and safety's, you know, at the forefront right now. So I'm really pleased with how much they're engaging on this, but something that we need to continue to push. And my hope is that a lot of what we do here in the US in terms of the education can be brought over to Europe and to South America, and have that be somewhat seamless. But we're going to have to make sure that we can change as needed and make sure that we're getting to the right people. So yeah, that's definitely our work ahead for the next year, for sure.
Great. And I think there is a culture shift, at least here in the US, where I've been president races. People are willing to speak up and say, hey, that BNet needs to, you know, move 6 feet off of the, you know, the tower. Like there needs to be that people will say, hey, that's a fall zone. We need some extra protection there. So I think that culture shift has happened, which is pretty important. And it's not just coming from the TD or the chief of course or what have you. It's, you know, parents, athletes, somebody, they're willing to speak up.
Yes, and that is a hugely important part that we've seen here in the US. That is not the case, as far as I understand, in Europe. Safety is definitely still it'll be fine, right? And coaches and parents don't feel empowered to speak up. It's somebody else's problem. We're not in charge of that, so they're the ones doing it. If they think it's fine, it's fine. And that's a huge part of what we want to tackle when we're thinking about safety internationally. It's something that came up just recently. There was World Cups over in Austria in, you know, the end of December that both Michaela Schifrin and Paula Moltzen spoke up about and said, you know, there was, I think, like 40 finishers of the 70 of the first run, and it was a big issue, and it was the snow surface. So, you know, safety, when you think about safety, it comes in all aspects, and we definitely need to think about snow surface as part of that. But the thing that I was most proud of was that they spoke up and that they said something, and that's something that we want. We want athletes, we want parents, we want coaches to be advocates and be able to say this and have it be received well. And to me, that's hugely important. So I was really happy they did that. With KBF, we said the same thing and said, you know, thank you for speaking up. And I hope that can continue and people can continue to have a voice. Obviously, the World Cup is different in lots of ways, right? There's lots of eyeballs on it. There's also lots of money in it, which is good and bad, right? The pressures that puts. But there's also, you know, way more safety protections for a lot of the World Cup races than a lot of the other races. So we definitely need to be thinking about this from every level of the sport, from the World Cup all the way down to the young races and everything in between, and make sure that's where the culture really comes in. That if everybody at every level of the sport buys into the importance of safety, then we're all going to be as safe as possible.
Yeah. Let's briefly touch on the stop the bleed slash laceration issue. Again, for people who don't know, like, what is it, and what are the collective actions that are being taken to prevent it,
Yeah.
or to address it if it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, so this has been a really interesting one that over the last probably 6 or 7 years, there's been a big increase in laceration injuries. So that's literally like, for the most part, it's people falling and then landing on their ski and getting cut by their ski. So very often it's on your leg somewhere that you land and you get cut by your ski. And the lacerations can be so severe that you really need a tourniquet and somebody who really knows how to stop a really bad bleed. There have been a ton of stories that there have been these lacerations that people have had really, really close calls on, making it out of it because of how severe they are and how long it takes to get to a hospital. So this is something that came up for us probably 6 or 7 years ago when there was a kid who was a GMBS student who had a laceration, a really severe one. And we were talking to him. I went and visited him because I was a GMBS alum also. We were talking about what happened, and he and his family were saying, we really want to do something to make a difference. They didn't feel like they had the capacity to do it, but they wanted to work with us at KBF to see if we could do something to start to educate people around lacerations and bleeding control. And that's really where this all started. And so we started doing a ton of education, and this was actually sort of a lot of this happened during COVID. So we did a lot over Zoom, which was really convenient. But education on like what happens when there's a laceration and how to actually, compress a wound and all of that. And then really the biggest thing that came out of it is these bleeding control kits. So yes, you need to know what to do, but you also need something. So when this kid, his name is Jonathan, when he got hurt, somebody had a belt and put that on as a tourniquet. What we are doing is we're creating these kits that actually are full of all of the things that you need if there's a bleed. So it has a tourniquet, it has gauze, it has gloves, it has all this different stuff in it. And it's a small little kit that can just go in either a backpack or in your pocket. We've distributed thousands of these across the country. And I said before, like, they're still hugely in demand. We're still getting, we've distributed, I think, over 200 just this year, just this season. And they are both really important to be on the hill, but also people are recognizing the importance of having them on the hill and having them on your person, having one up at the top, making sure that they're around, that they're able to be accessed when they're needed. And it's been really great for us, and we've heard so many stories of when those kits have been used and really made a huge difference. So I'm really happy that we're able to help that way.
They are great, and I've been involved in clubs who have received them, and had someone who's a coach who happens to be a nurse in her day job, who then trained people. And basically, it's one thing to have the kit itself, but also have someone have at least given you instruction as to what to do, and how to use the equipment in a time of need. I think the other thing that sort of valuable, it's probably worth mentioning, is at least FIS has required the use of cut-resistant leggings, long underwear, for World Cup and Continental Cup, or NORAM and Europa Cup athletes, which has been around for a number of years. I purchased them for my son a number of years back, as soon as I started hearing about these laceration injuries and getting scared as a parent. They are expensive, but I would rather pay that once than the alternative.
Yeah, for sure. And that, that cut resistant clothing is definitely, there's a lot of development of it, and they're trying to figure out how to make it comfortable, trying to figure out how to make it less expensive, and is something that we haven't at KBF, we haven't sort of dived into that all that much, but we know what's happening, and we've sort of we know people who are working on that. And, my biggest thing is just encouraging them to continue to do that. Yeah, my kids as ski racers, it's an expensive sport, and my kids are very young and it's already very expensive. So I think that's a whole other conversation. But
Yes.
but yeah, having those different opportunities and different things that can help with lacerations and help keep them safe in different ways, I think is super important.
Yeah. Well, unsolicited, not sponsorship, but who knows? Maybe they'll come in sideline swap for your used equipment needs.
Totally.
My son had a pair of Vicks, protection cut resistant pants that he outgrew, and I sold them, and unfortunately, we're still waiting on the new pair. There, the new comfort ones. Fortunately, he has some other ones that he can wear. So, but yeah, again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as they say.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about the other component to the Kelly Brush Foundation, and I guess we'll start with the Kelly Brush Ride, because that's how I, aside from the grants associated with buying BNet, kind of how my eyes were opened to the broader mission. And I'll talk about the KBF ride and like what that means in terms of being able to supply and facilitate the other component to the foundation's mission.
Yeah, for sure. So the Kelly Brush Ride is something that you're absolutely right. We're very well known for, that a lot of people come in and hear about us for the first time through this ride. It's our biggest fundraiser. We hold it every year in September. It started 6 months after my injury. So when I got hurt, I was on the Middlebury ski team. My ski team teammates said, we want to do something to help Kelly, to help raise money so that Kelly can buy a mono ski and get back out on the hill with us again. So they all decided they were going to ride 100 miles the first weekend back to school and raise money to do that. So that first year, it was like 20 of them, and they raised like $60,000. Which was just incredible. And every year after that, we started raising money for the Kelly Brush Foundation. And we've been doing it every year since. It's still our biggest fundraiser each year. And we still hold it in Middlebury because that's where I was in school. That's where we started. The college is a great partner of ours. And it's so fun. We have, close to 1,000 riders each year. We do road and gravel rides. And we have usually anywhere between 25 and 50 hand cyclists. So these are adaptive athletes who either have gotten their hand cycle or often other equipment from us, or just part of the community, and come and ride. And it's just a really fun way to raise money, to come together with people. It's one of those things, especially if you're in the ski racing world, if you come to this, you're going to find somebody who you know. It's sort of just like a really fun reunion. I hear that all the time from people, which is great. But also just a really nice way to see the adaptive athletes as part of the ride and sort of see what your money is going towards and supporting these athletes. And it's been really fun. We've really loved to do it. Like I said, it's in Middlebury. We've also added another ride. We do one out in the Bay Area. So we have one in Mill Valley that we've done for 4 years now. That one is a road ride and a mountain bike ride, and is also really fun. And we've done a couple other rides that we call like remote rides. People can do a remote ride wherever they are, and there's some that are sort of bigger than others. There's one in Park City that's a big remote ride that we'll do in the summer. And it's just a good way to get involved if you're not necessarily right here in New England, or it's hard to get back to Vermont. But really fun. All of them are really fun, and it's great. I love them. They're like some of my favorite days of the year, always.
I would imagine. So you mentioned your Middlebury friends started the ride 6 months after your accident to help you get equipment to get you back on the slopes, among other things. When did the idea for a foundation and something broader than just getting you a sit ski, take shape and germinate into the big organism that it is today?
It was actually right after I got hurt. So I came up with the idea, me and my family came up with the idea right when I was still in rehab. So it was in the first couple of months, and we really were looking at all of this energy, all of these people that were supporting me, from all of these different communities. I was part of like the Middlebury community was really tight and small. The ski racing community was really tight and small. Vermont was really tight and small. And all of these people were just coming out saying, we want to support you. And it was like, how can we harness this energy? So I have memories of talking about this when I'm, still in rehab. I was in rehab for I was in the hospital total for 3 months after I got hurt. And before I went home, lived at home for a couple of months and then went back to college in the fall. So it was then, and the thing that was really fortunate is that because my teammates planned this ride, they raised money for me, but then we had this sort of platform to start to raise money for KBF. I talk to people all the time these days about, nonprofits, and people want to start something and how did you do it? And, we're 20 years in and we're still doing great, which is awesome and not always the case. And I always say, how are you going to fundraise for it? We were really lucky that we got the ride going right away, and that's how we're able to sustain what we do. But really it started right in the beginning, and this was something that we wanted to do right away. And it's pretty cool that we were able to.
Great. And so, the KBF ride raises money to facilitate purchasing equipment for adaptive athletes and getting them, I guess, tell me the broader mission. It's both adaptive equipment as well as, I assume, access and sort of introduction to it, which I think is perhaps as much an issue as the equipment itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so the ride raises money for both of our missions. So it does raise money for ski racing safety as well. But yes, so the overarching mission is to help people with spinal cord injuries get out and be active. So our biggest program that we do is a grants program, as you alluded to. So this is to help people purchase adaptive sports equipment. So you want to go and bike ride outside of from your garage, we'll help you get a bike to do that. Same thing with skiing. You want to go skiing with your family and friends, you can we can help you purchase a mono ski. What we know is that adaptive equipment is way more expensive than regular equipment. So if you're looking to go get a bike from Walmart to go ride around the neighborhood, that's going to cost you like $100, maybe $200. The equivalent of that for a hand cycle is going to be $2,500. If you want to get a nicer bike, that's going to be a little bit better to ride, not even your top of the line, you're looking at like $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000. Same thing with a mono ski. To get, your sort of least expensive mono ski is going to be around $5,000 or $6,000, and you're going to go up to like $8,000 or $9,000. And then mountain bikes are even crazier. So, to get a mountain bike that works really well, you're looking around $15,000, and you can go up to $20,000 also. And that's not even like the fanciest, most bells and whistles. That's like getting you out there in something that's going to be safe and fun. So it's incredible, the equipment, but it's incredibly expensive. So our grants really help to break down that barrier, because a lot of people who we're serving are living on a reduced income also. And so, having that extra money to be able to purchase that equipment is really challenging. But yes, then we have other things that we're introducing people to sports. So to learn about adaptive sports, we have an online platform called the Active Project. This is all about introduction to sports. So it's, videos, it's information about what sports are, it's where you can do it. There's a whole map on there of where there's programs where you can try things, where there's other people in your local area that are also have disabilities that you can connect with. This is a tool that's being used by rehabs across the country. We're in, I think, over 15 rehabs now across the country using this platform. And then the other thing that we do is we bring people together. So we do things like that we call camps that are all across the country. It's, anywhere from 10 to 20 people to sort of intensively learn about one sport or one sort of area. And it's been incredible. So not only are people coming together, sometimes people are brand new, sometimes they're more experienced, but we're bringing people together to learn about this, to do that sport, because there's no motivation like seeing your peer do it. Right? Like, I didn't think that I could go do this, but I just watched a friend of mine do it, and so maybe I should go try it. But we also find that the camaraderie and the community connection that come from that is so valuable. So it really makes a big difference to be able to have somebody who you can talk to about your wheelchair and like, oh, what have you been getting because mine isn't working well like this, and what do you do for your car because I've been trying this and mine's not, I'm having a hard time with this. And that's the community and connection that really makes a big difference for somebody in their lives. And really, I mean, at the end of the day, what we find is that we're using sports to build connection and we're using sports to help people to get out there, but it's so much more than sports for the sake of sports. It's sports for so much more, right? It's all the benefits. It's the physical benefits, but it's the emotional benefits too, right? It's the how much better you feel when you are back from going on a hike or on a bike ride. It's the community connection. It's being able to go out with your family and friends and ski with them, and actually do that. It's the confidence you get when you know you can do these things, and then the confidence that you can bring that confidence into the rest of your life. Then you feel more confident to go get a job, to have a relationship, to just sort of live your life. And we just find that sports is a really powerful way to do this.
Yeah, I was going to say that when one has a spinal cord injury, that's not the only injury. I mean, I think there's a mental health challenge that's also presented that you're describing, and you talked about some of the benefits. For someone like yourself who is very athletic, having that potentially ripped away from you can be frustrating and disappointing and a whole host of other emotions. I think for others who may not have been as active or athletic, clearly they are facing challenges as well. But the sport, whether you're an athletic person or a non-athletic person pre-injury, will receive the same kinds of benefits regardless. Talk about that, I'm calling it mental health component, and how, access to adaptive sports, helps in that recuperation.
Yeah, for sure. And it's really interesting because you're absolutely right that there's we have all sorts of different types of people, right? And everybody, spinal cord injuries are not discerning. Anybody can get one. So for people who are like me, there's usually a huge drive to get back to sports. Sometimes, though, there's a barrier to that, right? And so, like, if you get injured in a certain sport and you don't want to do that, or the feeling of sport is so different that you don't want to get back to it because it feels so different. So there can be barriers that way, even if you were a big athlete before. And then for a lot of people who weren't athletes, you wouldn't consider yourself an athlete, right? But I think most people enjoy being able to get outside, enjoy being able to access, something other than the pavement, whether that is, really active or athletic, or it's just the benefit of going and seeing the birds, right? That like all of a sudden you realize that there are those barriers just because of your spinal cord injury. So for what we have really found is that sports can be the easy entry to get people. It's an easy ask to do some kind of recreation, and then they will start to see those other benefits. So if we said like, come and work on your mental health, there'd be a lot of people who'd be like, I don't want to do that. Maybe I'm sure there's plenty who would, but there would be a lot of people who'd be like, no way, But if we say like, come mountain biking with us, they will find so many more benefits because it was sort of an easy entry to come and, try mountain biking, that they weren't even expecting. And that's something that has been really powerful and really helpful for this community. And when we talk about mountain biking, I often talk with people who weren't active, and I'm like, mountain biking can mean a lot of different things. Like I use a mountain bike to go hiking with my family and my friends. And you can do that just out in flat trails. It doesn't have to be like super intense mountain biking, but it's a way to get off the pavement. It's a way to get outside. It's a way to move your body. And we know that there's a lot of benefits from that. So we have found it to be a really nice tool to be able to reach people in a lot of different ways.
Since this is a skiing oriented podcast, let's talk about, you call it mono skiing. I've always thought of it as a sit ski, but maybe
I use those interchangeably. I probably should use sit ski more because there's bi skis that you can use, which is not necessarily a mono ski. So yeah, sit skiing is probably the more universal term.
I think of a monoski, just as an aside, a friend of mine that I grew up with, who does have a back injury, but not a paralyzing back injury, but has sort of loss of use of, a limited use of a leg, uses a monoski, i.e. a single ski with two bindings on it, where he clips in that way to ski. I haven't figured out exactly why maybe why that's better, but anyways, that's what I think of as a monoski, and not the sit ski as I have been referring to it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, yes, I definitely, sit ski is probably more universal, but you can call it either a mono ski or a bi ski, which is a sit ski that has two skis underneath and is used, in some different situations. But yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about your first time in a sit ski. What was that like? I mean, you're obviously shortly after your injury. I mean, obviously some rehab and recuperation, but it wasn't years later, as I understand it. What was that like, and what is it like? Aside from yourself, what is it like for the people that you help in terms of get into sit ski activities?
Yeah. So for me, I always knew I wanted to go back to it. I got hurt in February, and it was the next November that I got into it for the first time. So I was so lucky that I was able to go and try it right away. But again, I knew that. I was very motivated. Getting out on the hill and in a sit ski for the first time was an incredibly humbling experience. It was so hard. I fell a lot. And it was, I thought, I'm a really good skier. I bet I'll be able to pick this up. I sort of know how to make a turn, all of that. That is all true. Once you sort of like get the basics of the balance and how to do it, now I can figure out, I know how to make a turn, like turn shape, all of those things. But in the beginning, it was not that way. It was hard and it took a long time to learn. I also really did it the wrong way. I went to what's called an adaptive sports program, which is essentially like ski school for adaptive sports, right? I did that for like 2 days, but then I just bought a sit ski and taught myself, which is the very wrong way to do it. I never recommend that to anybody. You should go to a program and you'll learn in a much better way. But that was, I was in college, and so I wanted to go and ski at the, Middlebury Snow Bowl with my teammates. After they were done training, we went over onto the bunny hill and I learned. And so it took me a couple of years to like get good and get to a place where I could ski a lot. Now I love it. It is awesome. It's so much fun. I ski all the time. And I wouldn't change it for anything. And, getting up and skiing with my kids and skiing with my friends, like all that's fantastic. But I tell everybody who's learning to monoski for the first time, or sit ski, as you say, it's the hardest adaptive sport to learn. It's very rewarding, but it's the hardest one to learn because there's so much, balance that goes into it, and it's really different and all that. Things like biking, you're biking, right? And there's not a lot to learn. There's certainly, you can get better at it and all of that, but, you can pretty much hop in and go. Sit skiing's hard, but again, so rewarding, and I love it so much.
That's great. I have seen some crazy stuff online, Instagram, with people in a sit ski pulling backflips off of jumps and doing who knows what, like things that scare the hell out of me.
Yeah.
So clearly it's, I'm sure the limitations are minimal, if you so choose.
If you so choose, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I am not, hucking backflips. I don't think I would have been hucking backflips if I hadn't gotten hurt either. So right. I think that's a personality thing. But yeah, I've got a good friend who she's got a spinal cord injury also. She's in a sit ski, and she's done a ton of, she went heli skiing in Alaska. She's done a ton of like really awesome powder skiing, and I just saw a video of like some of her highlight reels, and it's crazy the stuff that she's doing. So it's awesome. You can do a lot. in a sit ski, yeah, there's definitely, it takes a lot to learn that. And, having people to help you if you crash and are upside down in the powder is always helpful. But yeah, there are not a lot of limitations when you're sit skiing if you want to do that. And there's a lot that you can do. And, for me, one of the things about skiing is that because it's a gravity sport, it's really equalizing. And being able to, I do all the same stuff as I would if I was, not in a sit ski. I ride up the chairlift with my friends and my family. We ski the same runs. We go in and have lunch together. Like all of those things are all exactly the same. I'm just sitting doing it instead. And that's one of the things I love about it. Other adaptive sports are a little bit different in that way, right? If you're playing basketball, if you're playing wheelchair basketball, you're doing that with a team of other wheelchair users, which is awesome. And the community and the camaraderie that comes from that is incredible. But like, you're not necessarily doing that with your friends and your family on, a weekend. Sure, you can go shoot around, but you're not playing a basketball game of wheelchair basketball. That's different with skiing. And that's a big part of it for me, that I get to be part of my community. I do it with other sit skiers too. I love to go out and have other mono skiers come with me. That's some of the most fun when we get a big group of us together. But being able to have, that gravity as an equalizer is really, really important to me.
I had on last ski season's podcast, an episode last season, Lindsay Strange, who is a coach to the Para-Alpine U.S. team. And one of the things we talked about was the difference in coaching athletes, or teaching for that matter, athletes in a sit ski or as, they have differing physical limitations. And, she doesn't have a physical limitation, so she doesn't know exactly how they're experiencing it. What is the, from your own experience and from what you see with others, how do you teach adaptive athletes sit skiing if you don't have that frame of reference? Or there's a translation, and hopefully it's not lost in translation, the skills and techniques that one needs to master to ski appropriately.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's the same thing as like teaching, learning how to teach anything, right? Like a huge part of it is getting in and learning it yourself. So it's going to be very different when somebody able-bodied gets into a sit ski and tries it, because they're going to use a lot of different muscles than what I'm going to be using. I remember my husband got into my sit ski, or not mine, it must have been, he wouldn't fit in mine, but like into one years ago, and he skied a couple runs for the first time ever trying it, and he got out and he's like, oh, my hip flexors are so sore. And I was like, that is cheating. That is, I do not have that. I cannot use my hip flexors. So it's different, right? But getting in it and actually feeling what it feels like for him in that situation, he all of a sudden felt so many of the things that I have said over the years. And he was like, you're right, I did this and I felt that. And it really hit home sort of the things that I was saying. I think that makes a huge difference, right? For somebody to get in and actually try it and know how to do it. And I know that there's a few different adaptive instructors I've talked to that they're like, yeah, I'll take a sit ski out and go ski it for the day just so that I know I still can and feel it and understand what it's like, because it really helps to teach it that way. But I also think that you can learn how to teach it even like beyond that, right? You learn how to teach it. There's PSIA instruction on how to instruct adaptive skiers, and it's incredible. There's great experts around the country, and I love to be part of that and watch them coach, because it's really cool to see.
Yeah. Super interesting. In terms of, where does the Kelly Brush Foundation go from here? Like what is, aside from exporting education internationally, what does the future hold for the foundation?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and Now that I'm coming upon the 20th anniversary of my accident, it's something that we've been reflecting on a lot. Sure, we're looking back to see, all that we've done, but then what do we want to do in the next 20 years? What are we sort of reflecting on, and how can we make a big difference? And on the ski racing side, I think in a lot of ways we've talked about this, really taking what we're doing and moving that internationally, making sure that what we're doing is really cemented, and is really concrete in all over the country and at all levels of the sport. So those are really important to me. On the adaptive sports side, we want to make sure that more people have access to equipment. We know that that makes an incredible difference. And in the next 20 years, we want to make sure that every person with a physical disability has access to at least one piece of adaptive sports equipment. We also want to make sure that we have more access to recreation. So we haven't touched on this all that much today, but a monoski is no good if you can't get on the lift that's at the mountain. And there's been issues with that recently. A mountain bike isn't good if the trails don't work around you and you can't go on those trails. So we want to make sure that people with disabilities are completely intertwined with recreation generally, so that disability isn't something that needs to happen or adaptive people with disabilities don't need to recreate, in a different location. We don't need to think about that as separate, that it's something that happens everywhere. So that's something that we really want to lean into, is access to recreation all across the country. And then lastly is building that community, and working through our camps, working through our education, to make sure that everybody understands what's possible and has the community around them to actually make it happen. So we're excited to lean into those. We're excited to sort of build on all of the work we've done, and just make sure that people with disabilities have the ability to do whatever they want, because I love to do that and I want to make sure everybody has that opportunity.
That is awesome. You mentioned access, and you said there's some issues. So obviously, I haven't heard, but you may know better than I, ski areas not permitting sit skis. I don't know if that's a thing, but, what do you mean? Like, what do we need to improve on?
Yeah, so no, it's not that they're not permitting sit skiers. The big issue actually in skiing right now is the new chairlifts don't work well for sit skiers. So a lot of the new chairlifts that are going in have these like really, for lack of a better word, like race car seats,
Yeah.
right? They're like really
they're
fancy. They're
yeah.
the bubble chairs. They're heated. There's like all this stuff, right? And what that means is that my ski like doesn't go on the chair easily. And so I've had a ton of issues riding those lifts. I've ridden them at a couple different places, and to a point where like I avoid those lifts at all costs. There's an area out in Breckenridge. There was a new lift put in where the adaptive program won't go on that lift because it's unsafe for their sit skiers. And so all of a sudden this has become a really big issue because all of these new chairlifts are not working for sit skiers. And so we're trying to do some work with the chairlift companies. To their credit, they are being receptive to that feedback. It's now just turning that ship around and trying to figure out how we can make this work in a way that they want to make these cool fancy chairs and have them work for adaptive athletes. So that's kind of what the big issue right now in skiing, is making sure that those chairlifts work. And it's a problem, right? If all of a sudden now this isn't going to happen, but like all the chairlifts get changed at a mountain and I can't independently ski there anymore, that would be a really big issue. So it's going to be a slow process, but we want to make sure that we change that as much as we can.
So I know exactly what you're talking about. There's a new lift at Deer Valley that went in last year. It's a heated bubble. It has the race car like seats. And I could see how that could be a challenge. Is that they're probably not going to take the seat out, the cushion and the, but I would guess that there's some adapter that they could provide that would, or how do they retrofit it to solve the access issue?
It's not totally clear yet. And the problem is there's a couple different types of chairs, so they're all a little bit different, and some of the issues on them are all a little bit different. Sit skis are all a little bit different. So there's nothing universal in the depth that you need in terms of getting onto the seat, how you actually load the load the chair. So that creates a challenge. There's been talk about, yes, replacing a certain, like one of the seats in the middle on every, certain number of chairs on that chairlift so that you can go and you have to wait for that one. There's issues with that too. There's issues with how people load. So there aren't perfect solutions right now. But I think the important part is that we continue to raise the issue, we continue to talk about it, and we continue to have a seat at the table when they're talking about chairlift design, because I think that was a missed opportunity. That's being rectified to an extent at this point, but the solution hasn't become clear quite yet.
All right.
At least not the easy solution, I should say.
Right. All right. So I haven't had anyone from a lift manufacturer on yet, so I'll be sure to make sure that I ask that question. Perfect. If and when that episode should come out.
Great. That's a great idea.
What else for the listeners before we conclude? Where can they find you, the foundation? How can they support the mission, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So kellybrushfoundation.org or kbf.org. You can also find us on Instagram, kellybrushfdn, and on Facebook also. So, you can find what we're doing there. We hold events and we're around the country. We're going to be out in Park City later this year. So anybody who's out there, follow us and see the events that we're doing there. We'd love to have people involved. Like we talked about, our bike rides are in Vermont, but they're also Park City and in the Bay Area and all across the country. So would love to have people involved. It's just great to connect with the community, especially the ski community. It is certainly, very close to my heart and what I love the most. I hope to be able to have people more involved, because what we're doing, I think, really makes a big difference. I think, anybody who's in ski racing can really understand the safety part of it, but anybody who loves, any kind of action sports, I certainly never like to do the, fear that comes with it, but spinal cord injuries can happen, right? It can happen anytime. And knowing that we're taking care of this community who have these injuries, I think is really important and a nice thing if you wind up in this community, it's nice to know that there's, KBF is here to support.
Well, like I said earlier, it's a fantastic foundation, doing great work. Again, I know it predominantly from the almost exclusively from the safety side of things, which is nice. As I said, with respect to cut resistant, long underwear, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So that aspect of the mission is fantastic. And I agree, providing access and keep, both access to recreation and the ability to get equipment is fantastic. So I thank you for myself and for everyone else out there that I know appreciates your work. Are there any else? I appreciate that. Yeah, you're welcome. Any other concluding thoughts before we sign off?
No, I just think that there's a lot that's good in life, and my life is amazing and so full, and I'm really grateful that I've been able to make a difference in the ways that I have and do everything that I have and, live a life that is so full with my family and my kids and enjoying all of that. So I'm grateful for that.
That's awesome. I think we'll sign off with that happy thought.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for having me on.
Thank you. That was my conversation with Kelly Brush. Kelly's story is a powerful reminder that skiing isn't just about performance or podiums. It's about people, safety, access, and community. From transforming ski racing safety culture to opening doors for adaptive athletes, her work has changed lives and continues to shape the future of the sport. If this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to learn more about the Kelly Brush Foundation and the work they're doing, whether it's improving on-hill safety, expanding adaptive access, or rethinking how inclusive our mountain spaces really are. And if you enjoy this conversation, please follow Fresh Corduroy on your podcast platform of choice, leave a review, and share the episode with someone who loves skiing as much as you do. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next time on Fresh Corduroy.